Right. Is that okay, Hannahs? Can you see it? Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, looks fine.
Wonderful, wonderful. Just in case it looks like I'm crying at the moment, I'm not. I'm obviously sad that Hannahs is leaving North Wales. And I wish him all the best for the future. My sort of fringe keeps going in my eyes, so I'll apologise for my fringe tonight. But I'm getting a haircut on Friday, so things should be cured then. So tonight's talk, I did it a few years ago on birding with Borat about Kazakhstan, the greatest country in the world? Question mark. Now, to be honest, years ago, about 20 years ago, I didn't really know a lot about Kazakhstan. And as Nigel says, it's the largest landlocked country on the planet, and it used to be part of the Soviet Union. Some of the things it's famous for is it's got a really large population of wild horses, and apparently it's the place where man first trained and rode horses on the planet. Apparently, it's also famous for cultivating apples, and it's also the world's first and largest space launching site. So, lots of rockets have gone into space from Kazakhstan, and Tim Peake, who spent a bit of time on the International Space Station, that's how he got into space. He was launched from Kazakhstan. But to be fair, I suppose to a lot of people that didn't know a lot about Kazakhstan, they became aware of it because of Borat and his introducing us to Kazakhstan and when he went around America. So as well as Borat, I suppose Reg Thorpe also introduced me to Kazakhstan because he he's done a bit of guiding with Nature Trek over the years. So he's sort of told me about a lot of the wonderful species that you get there, and a lot of them are ones that are sort of mega vagrants to the UK or sort of Western Europe. Things like sort of black lark, and then you've got Pallas's sandgrouse and sociable plover, and then you've got the birds that are sort of on the fringe of the Western Palearctic, things like Gutenstarts, red starts on the back there. So there's some real quality birds over there in Kazakhstan. So I went there on a trip at the end of May, beginning of June 2013. I went with a company called Bird Finders, and we were led by Svetlana Ashby, who is of Russian origin, and she actually studied. I think she did her degree in Kazakhstan, but she lives over. She's based over in the UK now. She's married to Vaughan Ashby, but she's a very good birder, and she was a great leader. So I mean, some of the things, the birds that you think about with from Central Asia and Kazakhstan. Black lark. Now, back in 2003, we were lucky. One turned up at South Stack. There'd been a funny bird scene, and Ken Croft went and clinched it and spread the word, and we all sped over there and got fantastic views of this bird from Central Asia. It wandered already, it was going through the BBRC at the time from Spurn from years earlier that they just didn't know what it was, but this was the first twitchable one in the UK. And so, seen one in the UK, but it'd be something that'd be great to catch up with again from Central Asia. So that's where you can see it's bang in the middle there, sort of the former Soviet Union. It's got various different types of habitats. We were sort of based, part of the trip was down here in the southeast. You got the Tian Shan Mountains and sort of a lot of desert and some woodland areas, and then we went further north to Astana, where there's some plains and also some fantastic wetland reserves. So as you see, we flew in down here to Almaty, and that's where the first part of the trip was based, just down here. And this corner of the world sort of backs onto China and Kyrgyzstan. So we flew with the Ukraine International Airlines. I think it was from Stansted, because they had daily flights to Kiev. I think there was one flight from Heathrow, but it only went once a week. So if there's any problems with that flight, you've got to wait for a week till the next one. So if you go with Ukraine International, there's always daily flights going to Kiev and on from there to Almaty in Kazakhstan. So when we actually landed, we went out, did a bit of birding in the countryside, just on the outskirts of Almaty. You can see the backdrop of the Tian Shan Mountains rising quite rapidly there. And Almaty, it's right on the edge of a tectonic plate, and the city was destroyed in 1887 and 1911. By an earthquake. So that's why Astana, which is a new capital, is actually in the north, in a far more stable area, because apparently in, I think it was 2004, experts said that in the next 10 to 15 years, Almaty was due another massive earthquake, which could be devastating to the city. So that's why they were actually planning to, they've done the new capital further north, but, nothing's happened at the moment, touch wood. Don't want to sort of put a hoodoo on them. But I mean, the birding round there is absolutely, fantastic. It's like open country. Some birds that we might be familiar with from Southern Europe, things like Eurasian roller, nesting in an old disused quarry there, because they nest in sort of holes, either in nest boxes, disused houses, or sandbanks and things like that. So fantastic to see these wonderful birds. Then we got things like lesser grey shrike, and you can sort of, you get to see the nice open country, and sort of, lots of horses around. But the first proper birding spot we stopped at was a little wetland site on the edge of this sort of drier semi-desert area called Sorbulak, and looking at it, looks like a place where pylons go to die, because like the pylons just fallen over in the background, and they've not bothered removing it or anything. So we're just having a little look around this wetland to see what we could find. It was, apart from the call of reed type warblers, sort of marsh frog was there. And the next minute, a massive sort of white-tailed sea eagle flew over. So that was fabulous to see. Sort of almost took our heads off, because in the UK, you always really think of them as being, from the Northern Isles and that. So it seemed quite strange seeing them like open, sort of semi-desert-like habitats. But there are some wetlands around there where they breed. And then it was getting mobbed by the eastern form of black kite here. This is a black-eared kite. So first spot after that we went to was the end of this dam. There's all these rocky areas, and you can see there's a flock of rose-coloured starlings. So we're used to seeing ones, or usually just single birds over here in the UK, usually late summer when they come over, because they're quite an eruptive species, and then the odd ones sort of stay over winter, like the one we've had on Anglesey that was still in Amloch till about 2 or 3 weeks ago. But it was great just to see them in big numbers, and seeing these flocks whizzing by, sort of 100 or 200 sort of rose-coloured starlings, and you could just sort of envisage them with wanderlust just kind of going for hundreds of miles until they end up in a feeder in Chemice Bay or the like. But it was great to see them actually sort of displaying to each other. This is a lovely fine male with his big shaggy crest there, and you can see him displaying to the female. They've got this brilliant mouth. When you see inside the mouth, they've got a black inside to the mouth and a black tongue as well that looks quite contrasting to the edge of the pink bill. So obviously very photogenic, and even the poo seems to have a little bit of a pink tinge there. So that's you can sort of, I'm not sure exactly what they're feeding on there, but they're great to see them in such good plumage there. Other birds that are similar but different. This is the local species of white wagtail there. This is personata, otherwise known as masked wagtail. A couple of years back, there was one spent the winter in a housing estate in South Wales that I was lucky enough and went down to see. But that's the common race in southeast Kazakhstan where we were. So they were one of the commoner birds. So one of the first places we stayed was a place called the Takum Desert, near a place called Konshengel. It's open plain. It's kind of quite away from the nearest town. So when birders go there, they put up these sort of tented camps, which is it's so that you can actually go birding just from from as soon as you wake up in the morning, so you don't have to worry about breakfast and sort of traveling to the site that might take an hour or so to get there. So you get up at the crack of dawn, go birding, and then come back for a spot of lunch there. So just around the actual the tented camp there, you've got things like red-headed bunting, great birds. See, I've never seen those before. Sort of replaces black-headed bunting as you go sort of further east. Absolutely amazing bird. Some of the warblers that were nesting in the little scrub there is this is Sykes warbler. So this is the one that was split from booted warbler. In Kazakhstan, the Sykes warbler tends to be in the more desert areas in the south, and then as you go further north into the sort of plains and wetland areas, that's replaced by the booted warbler further north. And there was lots of insect life around there. There's just sort of thousands of these sort of ladybird-like bugs. It makes you wonder if that's what the rose-coloured starlings were eating that actually gave them their sort of pink coloration there. Some of the birds that were flying overhead were the swifts. Now, if you look closely, it looks a little bit like pallid swift, but it's not as pale. But it's still got this quite sort of scalloped appearance. This is the Pekinensis race of common swift. It's got an amazing migration because these are the birds that like breed in China. Originally, they weren't sure where they nested. They thought that they might go south like our birds do, but equivalent over there, going down to the Philippines or something. But they put some satellite trackers on them, and they realized that from China, they go west through Central Asia. They head the way down to the Middle East, and then they cross over to the Horn of Africa and go down and spend the winter around Cape Town with like the birds that that breed here in Britain that have just gone south. And then when the spring comes, they head back up to the northeast, over the Middle East, and then back over to China. So one hell of a migration that for the Pekinensis subspecies of swift. I think with satellite tagging is just amazing. Just sort of the information it's given on bird migration at the moment. I must confess, I am a slight arachnophobe. So when I saw someone taking a photograph of something just outside my tent, went over for a quicker look and thought, oh my God, what type of spider is that? But this is one of the camel spiders, otherwise known as a solifuge. And, they're kind of almost as big as your hand. They've got hairs on their hairs. They've even got like these extra little legs underneath, and they're quite fast at running. And there they are right outside our little tented camp there, and really big and hairy, and quite a few of them were around in the area. So once I chilled out, we had a cup of tea, and sort of it was quite nice sort of seeing that the way that we we were staying in the ways that sort of like for hundreds and hundreds of years the local Kazakh people stayed out in the desert there, and sort of riding on the horses, carrying a golden eagle and go out sort of hunting food for the day. It was quite nice to sort of to see that. This was my roommate. I think it was John. It's normally Dave or John that I sort of stay with roommates in when I go to foreign holidays. But inside it was just really beautiful. It's a tent with a bed, and it's got this lovely sort of carpet all around the edge there. So it was absolutely it was quite cozy. It was only, I think we stayed here just for about 2 nights, but as we were unpacking and I lifted my my rucksack up, there was a solifuge and a camel spider had actually shed its skin in the 2 days that we'd actually been staying in this yurt, this type of tent called a yurt. And it's a good job I didn't sort of see it when we're in there. Otherwise, I wouldn't have slept if I thought there was the chance of that falling on my face in the night. But you can see these lovely yurts out there in the middle of nowhere. There's the little toilet tents on the right, kept at a reasonable distance there, so you don't have to worry about sort of noises or anything like that. But quite basic, really. So you've got to have strong knees and strong legs for going to the toilet there. But it was an amazing experience, sort of staying out there in the desert. And at night, the sky was just brilliant because there was no light pollution whatsoever. And there was one other sort of yurt camp just a mile or two away where there was some German bird watchers staying. So it was quite an experience. And obviously, I've got a little bit of a slack bladder, so obviously I had to get up in the night to go to the toilet. And the little toilet tent, some migrating barn swallows having to sort of, as it's going dark, wondering where they can roost. And there's no trees in the area, so they were using our little toilet tent to sort of roost overnight. So unfortunately, I had to disturb those once or twice. Yeah. But when we got up in the morning, there's some little hills just at the back of the flat desert where we were, and we went over to see this thing. Bit of a dodgy photo, but this is of a McQueen's bustard. This has been split from Hubara bustard that you get like in North Africa and the Canary Islands. As you go to the Central Asia, it gets replaced by McQueen's bustard. I think it was one of these that was in Suffolk in the 1960s. There's some great old black and white photographs of it just walking down the side of the road. But Hubaras and McQueen's bustards they're quite interesting. Like most busters, they have an interesting display. They tend to sort of turn the front of themselves inside out. So they've got a big white fluffy bit, and they run around in a circle like a clockwork toy, just like, you know, about 4 or 5 times to display and catch the eye of any passing female McQueen's bustard. So it was great to see those, and you know, there's red-headed buntings singing there, and bimaculated larks. There's quite a lot of those. A bit of a dodgy photo again, but I just put this in because bimaculated larks look quite like calandra larks, but instead of having the black underwing, they've got a very black tail with just the white edge there you can see on that photo. So there we had, there's Svetlana and the rest of us sort of all happy after seeing McQueen's bustard. But when you see, as you go the other way into the desert, it's very flat and quite, sort of monotypic. You're trying to think, crikey, how are we supposed to find birds in that area? But one of the birds why we camped there was for Caspian plover. Usually they were in the area around where our tented camp was, but unfortunately this year there was a lot of horses, and so we were having trouble to finding them. But we were getting, nice sort of views of larks. Again, this is a closer view of bimaculated lark, which is it was just a little bit smaller and more compact than the calandra lark, which when they fly, they're almost the size of quail. It's really massive lark, and they've got this really black underwing with a lovely white trailing edge when they take off. A few other bits and bobs we had. This type of gazelle, I think they said it was Arabian gazelle at the time, but I think it's actually called goitered gazelle, like goiter, like when you've got thyroid problems. You can kind of see it's got a bit of a swollen neck there. But we only saw 1 or 2 of those. I think there must be maybe problems with hunting there, so because they definitely were very common there. Other birds that we had in the desert area, things like black-bellied sandgrouse. And we had this close encounter with this little snake. It's a steppe ribbon racer, otherwise called the arrow snake. It's actually venomous. It's only small, but it's venomous, and it does have quite a bit of attitude, because as we were photographing it, most snakes tend to go away, but this thing kept coming towards you. So we had to sort of, observe it from a reasonable distance, just in case we had to absolutely peg it. So, that was around our camp. We were hoping to get Caspian plover around there, but there was a massive flock of sort of herd. What is it? Flock? Horse? Herd? Anyway, a load of horses, and they were all around. But, you sort of seeing all these horses, and you kind of wonder, hold on, there's probably more horses than people in Kazakhstan, and then you realise that they're not just for riding. They actually use the horses for horse meat that was for sale in the few shops that we did actually visit. So we were having a bit of trouble trying to find Caspian plover, but then luckily the German group, the bird guides, managed to find some. So they led the way, and we sort of bombed off and followed them. And then there was sort of a little bit of a twitch on, and we came across this small group. So the brilliant little plovers. They're probably about between the size of a ring plover and a dotterel, but more colours like a dotterel. So fantastic looking plover there. So that's Caspian plover. I had seen them before, but only in winter plumage in Kenya about 20 years ago. But it was great to see this, in full breeding plumage, because they're beautiful birds. So after we'd kind of relaxed on the Caspian plover that we had been searching quite hard for, we took a slight detour up a little rocky gorge, a place called Tamgali. And the special bird that we're looking for here was the eastern rock nuthatch. For any of you that have been to Lesbos in Greece, Eastern Europe, it's the western rock nuthatch there, and then as you go further east towards Asia, it gets replaced by the eastern rock nuthatch, which is generally it's similar. It's a bit bigger with a much stouter bill. And this valley, the trees, they were covered in sort of in large numbers of black veined white, which is a butterfly I'd never seen before. But apparently they used to be in the UK until about 100 years ago, but they became extinct, and but they are found out throughout Europe and going into Asia. But it was nice to see them, and nice to see them in sort of quite big numbers there. Another thing that we saw, a lot of was cuckoo. Obviously, they're declining in the UK, but it was nice to see, good numbers and hear them around. So we did well for Eurasian cuckoo when we were over there. So just some nice scenery shots there and nice places to go birding. Another sort of semi-desert arid type species was Rufous bushchat, that used to be called back in the day. Now rufous-tailed bush robin, because there's quite a few more species of bush robins in Africa. And the eastern one it's a bit more pale and sandy coloured compared to the western one, which is a bit more rufous, that you might get in Spain and Portugal. So it was nice to catch up with those. Other species from Central Asia, this is a nice breeding plumage steppe grey shrike, very similar to great grey shrike, but you can see that the white wing patch on the primaries is much bigger, and there's a lot more white in the secondaries as well. So it's quite a nice looking bird. They've also got quite a few subspecies of lesser whitethroats in Central Asia. I think this is the Halimedendrii subspecies. It's quite a small one, very pale sandy back and neck. And so apparently they can occasionally turn up in Western Europe. But again, seeing them on the breeding grounds was nicer. And some of the insects that we bumped into, this is an antlion. Antlions they're like a bit, I think they're not a million miles away from lacewings, but it looks like halfway between a lacewing and a damselfly. But I think they're more interesting in the sort of juvenile, sort of larval stage, because what they do is the larva has this sand trap, like this really loose sand going into a hole, a pit at the bottom there, where the juvenile is just underneath the sand, just like the Sarlacc's pit in Return of the Jedi from Star Wars. It's obviously where George Lucas got his inspiration from for this. It was the antlion. There's Luke Skywalker before they were trying to push him into the Sarlacc's pit. And then at the base of it, there are different types throughout the world of antlions, but they generally have got a fat body, and they've got this head with horrendous jaws, so that as the prey slips down in the sand to the bottom of the pit, all of a sudden these huge jaws come up and just grab it and just pull it underneath and then eat it at their leisure. It's like the stuff of nightmares. But when you go anywhere, it's always nice to see the bird that is on the front of the field guide. And this is another speciality of Central Asia. This is the Saxhall sparrow. The trees, the habitat that it lives in, called Saxhall, and that's where it gets its name from. And it's luckily we got a few sort of half decent views of them. It's very washed out sandy coloured sparrow, but it's got this lovely fawn supercilium, just stripe over the eye there. So it was nice to sort of catch up with the bird from the front of the book. And this was our driver on the right and his assistant on the left. The one on the left was more friendly, as you can tell, and just in front of him is a female Saxhall sparrow, which just looks a bit like a pale washed out small house sparrow, to be fair. Other sparrows that we had in the area included the Spanish sparrow, again, another sort of European type species that is found in the open country woodland and scrubby areas. Another habitat that we visited was the Turunga forest. It's a bit like the cork oak forest that you get in Iberia, in Spain and Portugal. But the trees are Euphrates poplar, otherwise known as the desert poplar. And there's a few species that are quite specific to this kind of habitat that we saw. The woodland was very nice. One of the things I like birding in Kazakhstan is the weather was always beautiful, blue skies and little fluffy clouds. So it was very aesthetically pleasing. And in these desert poplars, we had nice views of azure tit, really a bit like a snowy coloured blue tit with a long tail, absolutely fantastic. I had seen them before once with Martin. I think Ryanair were doing cheap trips to Scandinavia, and we did like, I think it was a 3-day trip to Finland to get a few sort of southern Finland specialities and to twitch one of these. There was an azure tit coming to a feeder in the snow, and I mean, they're fantastic birds to see at the best of times, but actually seeing one in snow was amazing. But it was still great to see them feeding in their natural habitat. Other tits that we saw when we were over there, this is cinereous tit. It kind of replaces great tit in sort of the more deserty areas in Central Asia. It's very sort of washed out and sort of grey looking. Now, there are also great tits a little bit further north. In parts of southeast Kazakhstan, they actually introduce great tits because someone had the bright idea of thinking that let's introduce new species and sort of add to the biodiversity of the region, which obviously we know generally is bad. And so the great tits down the southeast are now in the range of cinereous tit, and they've started hybridizing with them. So you can see, looking at the last one, very sort of monochromatic. There's hardly any hint of yellow on it, but this one's definitely got quite a bit more of yellow at the top of the breast. So there's obviously some great tit genes in there. But there's a very cute looking cinereous tit just fledging. So that was nice to see. Other specialities of this Turunga forest is white-winged woodpecker, very close in appearance to great spotted, but you can see there's far more white on the wing than what you'd see on any great spotted woodpeckers here in the UK. Another speciality, I think, that sometimes turns up in Eastern Europe and the Eastern Palearctic is the yellow-eyed stock dove. It's very similar to our stock dove there, but it's just got this yellow flesh around the eye and the bright yellow eyes. So again, that was nice to catch up with, because it's the sort of thing that I used to see in Birding World. They do articles on the different corners of the Western Palearctic, and so nice to catch up with these kind of species. The hawks that we had around there, this kind of habitat was frequented by shikra, which is it's similar to sparrowhawk. It's found in Asia and also into Africa. So getting around was pretty good. The roads weren't particularly busy, and the good old-fashioned Soviet-style motorways help you get across the country very, very quickly. And again, some quite aesthetically pleasing places to go birding. So then we came back to what we in the end referred to as the posh hotel, because we were staying in tented camps, and also in, as you'll see in a bit, some other slightly more dodgy habitations. But there was a nice lake by the hotel there. But what made me laugh is that this was like a bit of an open venue where they had weddings. They had a platform, and there was a Kazakh wedding going on one day, and it was all traditional Kazakh music, and so it sounded sort of like what we'd expect from that part of the world. And then the bride and groom came out to have their first dance together, and it was Together Forever by Rick Astley, which wasn't what I was expecting as the first dance at a Kazakh wedding. So that was quite amusing, because Rick Astley's from St Helens, and I'm from St Helens originally. So it kind of like I thought that was quite amusing. So quite nice, sort of lodges where we were staying in there. Outside there was lots of these little firebugs, which got great patterns on the back. They look like these sort of African war masks. But there's a little group of these beetles just outside on the pavement. And because we had that nice lake outside, there was night herons were usually roosting in the trees around the lake there. So the next day we went into the foothills of the Tian Shan Mountains. So it was like meadow, sort of subalpine meadows, more greeny, leafy areas, and it seemed to be better for sort of migrant birds. Things like this is Indian golden oriole. It's got a little bit of black behind the eye, and it's also got a bit more yellow in the wing than Eurasian golden oriole. And then all of a sudden, this massive Kazakhstan mountain dog came bouncing down the road. Now it looks like you know, I know it's a dog, but it looks like if you crossed like a dog with a lion or a bear or something like that. It's absolutely huge, monstrous things. And it was, to be honest, I think it was just after a bit of company. And I'm not sure how much rabies there is over there, but it's like I'm always a little bit afraid of going too close to dogs when I'm abroad, just in case that, you know, they have got rabies. But thankfully, after about 20 minutes, he got bored with us all and sort of wandered off, because he was kind of hindering our birding style a bit when you're trying to creep up on a bird and then you've got this huge hound next to you. Because one of the birds that we came into contact with there was a nightingale, but this is a different subspecies to the one we get over here. This is the Golsey subspecies. You know, when you look at it, it's almost coloured a bit like a garden warbler. It's very pale and washed out and grey and sandy compared to the more rufous birds that we get over here in Western sort of Europe and Britain, in the southeast, places like Suffolk. So you can sort of see these subalpine meadows and sort of the high peaks beyond. So it was, you know, a bit more refreshing, the habitat here, than birding in the desert areas. A bit of a dodgy record shot, but this is Siberian meadow bunting. The most western population, we're right at the edge of the fringe for that species. I did get to see that on my honeymoon in China back in '98, but it was nice to see that again a decade or so later. But the meadows there were absolutely fabulous. You know, the colours and the wildflowers in the hayfields was just amazing. And I mean, just look at all those colours there, and they were full of the sound of common quail. We also had corncrake calling there. And as we were walking through, we put up one quail that I managed to get this sort of this record shot of. So it was quite nice to see quail, because they're normally quite difficult to see. So I was really happy here. I actually felt like sort of singing some of the songs from The Sound of Music. It was just a beautiful day, a beautiful meadow, and quails and corncrakes calling around. It was fabulous. So also, you know, quite a few butterflies, this type of grizzled skipper species here, and a fritillary. But you know, there's plenty of stuff to look at. Obviously, quite rough, the roads that we were travelling on when you go in off piste. And one of the sort of sad things about it, these areas, is a lot of people, you know, like national parks in Britain, people come out to go for a picnic at the weekend, but it was a bit of a mess in some place. They'd have a picnic in a fabulous, really beautiful spot and just leave absolutely shed loads of rubbish behind. But the reason why we were hanging around the rubbish pit here is we were right at the edge of a river, and this is the habitat of where penduline tits breed. There's several types in Kazakhstan. I think you've got Eurasian penduline tit. I think you've got black-hooded or black-headed penduline tit, and this one that we saw, which was white-crowned, white-capped penduline tit. So yeah, white-crowned. But I've seen like Chinese and Eurasian penduline tit before, but I'd never actually seen a penduline tit's nest. And it's just fabulous looking at the sort of the amount of effort that's gone into it, and you know, just the way that it's tethered on to the branches at the top, and then you've got the main chamber, and then on the right you've got the funnel where it actually accesses from below, and it's just kind of full of like lambs and goat's wool and what have you. It's just like, I don't know how long it takes them to make this, but I mean, it's like, I'm always impressed when I find a long-tailed tit's nest, but this is just an amazing looking nest. And so this is the habitat where they like, just along the sort of the mountain rivers and streams there, which also is good for dippers. This is the brown dipper. This was the common dipper that we encountered on these mountain streams, also known as Palace's dipper. Slightly closer view of it there. It's a bit fatter and chunkier than our dipper, but it's all sort of like a deep dark chocolate brown. This is one of the other dippers that we managed to see, thankfully. This is the white-bellied, the leucogaster form of white-throated dipper. White-throated dipper is, that's like our dipper, as you could put it. This is one taken in North Wales. You know, to be fair, I think, you know, absolute stonking-looking dipper ours. But, you know, it's very, again, quite chocolate brown, dark on the wings, but nice chestnut belly. But the leucogaster race has got a white belly as well, and it's quite pale and grey on the neck. So it was good to actually sort of catch up with that as well. And in the northeast, there's also a different subspecies of dipper, of white-throated dipper, that is all brown, similar to the brown dipper. So So I think that's the Bicalensis subspecies of white-throated dipper. Now, we did have a one of the guys before we saw that white-throated dipper. We'd had a almost saw one. We got told, right, there's this bridge here, and there's one just over the edge, and one of the guys on the trip legged it forward and flushed it before anyone else had the chance to see it. So, but luckily he did make up for it. He found one, that one that we just saw at another site. But when we went back to this site, I think we went on the Friday, then we went back on the Saturday, but it was a bank holiday weekend then. And as I said to you, all these people come in at the bank holiday weekends and have the picnics and that. And so the spot where the dipper had been the day before, there was people swimming in the rivers there. So, you know, there weren't going to be any dippers around when there's people swimming in the rivers. The kids come down there, they come for a picnic, they bring their bong, they just kind of get high. Then some of their mates are in the car park, they're doing donuts and wheel spins and handbrake turns. So, you know, it's a totally different kettle of fish going into sort of this national park area on a weekend, say bank holiday, compared to sort of like a weekday. But we just went a bit further away from where the people were. We still bumped into other bits and bobs, like the grey wagtails are absolutely really vivid plumage, very nice to see. Another more eastern type species, the blue whistling thrush, this lovely iridescent blue thrush about the size of a field fir, and they naturally habitate along river streams, and it's always nice to bump into. And this is the Maura race, the Siberian stonechat. Again, very similar to ours, but you can sort of see that the white on the vent is going around onto the upper tail coverts and the rump. So these have got a really big white rump. Another interesting, well, there's a subspecies at the moment. This is the eastern form of the goldfinch. But as you can see, it's got the red on the face, but it doesn't have any of the black. And instead of being quite warm brown on the back, it's quite grayish brown. So I do like going to these places when, you know, it's not just all for ticks and new species. You know, sometimes it's like, you know, it's almost as good when you see a subspecies that you've never seen before. And you know, and this, especially when I was going through the field guide, I thought, wow, this is quite an interesting looking bird, the eastern form of goldfinch. So as you can see, very pale birds, and they've also got a very big white rump when they fly. Other things that we just went for a walk around, there's a little bit of a wet meadow here with some what look like willow-like trees around the edge. Again, more mass wagtails. Migrants that were moving through at the time, things like greenish warbler. So nice to get close views of those, shown really well. Next day, we started heading a little bit further east. We were going to a bit more, I think, a few more dry areas, but we stopped off to have breakfast in this sort of agricultural fields. There was some, you know, that were overgrown, and the best bird we had that morning was long-tailed shrike. So it's got the nice black mask. The ones that you get in the Himalayas have got like a black cap as well, so it's more like a black hood. So it was nice to see that, because I'd never seen that subspecies of long-tailed shrike before. I think there was one about 10 years ago on the Outer Hebrides, but you know, pretty amazing looking birds. So yeah, headed off east into more drier areas again. Sort of there's the larder coming towards you. We stopped off at a little dry quarry where there was this this nesting colony of pale sand martins. So when you look at them, look how pale and sandy they are on the back, like compared to, this is one I took at Kemlin a few years ago. Even in good light, you know, ours are quite a chocolatey dark brown, whereas these are far paler. So that was nice to see those and get great views of them. So as we headed east, we had to go over the Kokpek Pass. These Soviet-style toilets, you know, very sort of nice sort of pictures on them. But we hadn't come here for the toilets. We came here for this rocky gorge that had a few species that, you know, we were on our target list. This was one of the ones I really wanted to see. Not the best photo, but it's a white-capped bunting. A really sort of stonking looking bird. I only got some sort of distant digiscope shots because it did come over to our side of the valley, but it was a little bit skittish. Hume's whitethroat, formerly called Hume's lesser whitethroat, you know, even darker than the ones that we get over here in the UK, where the grey on the hood actually goes onto the back. So it's a very grey looking lesser whitethroat type species. But as we were heading back, there was this guy. I just love the look on this guy's face, just thinking, crazy, crazy Westerners. What's going on here? Sort of like he's like by the toilets cleaning out the drain, and then this sort of crazy guy comes along looking where he's cleaning out the drain, and because there's a few butterflies there. I think there's type of copper of some species, and look, the guy on the left, he just can't get over it. It's just like, what's wrong with these people? What are they doing? What are they doing? So we just moved a little bit further along and stopped for lunch because there was another nesting colony of rose-coloured starlings here, and just to the side of us there was Isabelle wheatear hopping around, collecting food, and then every now and then it kept going down what looked like a small rabbit burrow, and because it was feeding chicks. And again, these little rocky sort of where there were holes, the rose-coloured starlings were nesting. And one rose-coloured starling had actually just laid an egg on the floor. I think it was broken on the other side there, but like starling eggs in the UK, very blue. So this very similar shaped one, just white instead of blue there. So we moved on to the Charin Canyon next. A bit like a small version of the Grand Canyon, but again, quite aesthetically pleasing. Sort of oasis like woodlands lining the river there, and then sort of moving on to these dry sort of arid foothills. So again, desert habitat here, doesn't look particularly green. But when we got up the hill slightly, there was a bit more slightly green vegetation, getting away from the really sort of arid deserty bits. What we did is we just perched ourselves on the side of the hill, because you can just see here there was a little trickle of a stream, and this stream is bringing a bit of extra greenery, and this little puddle here was absolutely fantastic for birds. So we kind of hung around here probably for about an hour and just waited for the birds to come back in after we got settled and kept quiet there. So we were just kind of looking down there, seeing what was going on, and then the birds started to come in. So here we've got at the back, we've got Mongolian finch, formerly known as Mongolian trumpeter finch, the same sort of genus, just got very nice pink wing markings, and doesn't have the red bill of the trumpeter finch. At the front here, we've got shorelark or horned lark. What else we've got here? We've got grey neck bunting, fabulous looking little bunting. It's kind of looks a bit like ortolan. So again, that was a new species for me, so that was great to see and get nice views of it. And then managed to get one of these. This is crimson winged finch. There's two species. There's a western one that you get in places like the Atlas Mountains of Morocco, which unfortunately when I went there years ago I didn't manage to see. So I kind of felt a bit better that in Kazakhstan I did manage to catch up with a crimson winged finch, albeit of the eastern form. And then at the back you've got another Mongolian trumpeter finch. That's the male, because he's quite pink, pinky wings, and that's a female that's quite dull looking just out the front there. Again, the hornlark, the shored lark, this is the brantai subspecies. So managed to see a few species like Penicillata in Georgia, the one that the race that we get in the UK. It's in the American hornlark, but one of my favourites actually, the one that you get in the Atlas Mountains of Morocco. Again, sort of at the ski resorts up there. These are brilliant looking birds. But again, nice to see a different subspecies of shorelark. Another thing that was good to see, I've never seen, I don't think I'd seen wild gerbil in the wild. I think these were the greater gerbils, so they're quite, almost rat-sized like gerbils, but still very cute and behaving a little bit like meerkats, just like a few heads popping out, keeping their eye out in every direction. And because over the generations I've had several gerbils, and this was when this was Charlie. When Charlie died, the kids made a gravestone and put Charlie, the amazing and great gerbil. I'm not sure exactly what he did, but he was very cute, to be fair. So just finishing off there, so more around the drinking hole, there was a few more of these Mongolian trumpeter finches. We did have one male desert wheatear. He wasn't very photogenic. He wasn't letting us get close. So this is one I managed to photograph in Morocco in the past. So again, sort of gives you an idea of the sort of birds that we're getting over there. So we were staying at Well, we were over right in the dry east. We were staying in this hotel that wasn't the posh hotel. When you went in, the two ladies behind the desk were kind of like looking at you with that death look, as if you just run over their pet cat. And as you're walking upstairs to your room, there was literally slate tiles coming off. It was a bit dangerous, but there was a karaoke bar there. So the rooms, a bit basic, but as long as there's a bed for the night, didn't matter. I wouldn't want to mess with the electrics too much because they did look a little bit on the dodgy side. One thing that was quite funny is with the bathroom, the it's it's a lot of go less than beautiful, resistant, and hygienic. But the funny thing with the bathroom was outside the hotel was the most beautiful rose garden, and the gardener spent most of the day watering the roses to make them look beautiful. But the issue with that is when we went into the hotel, they said that there might be issues. Some of the rooms won't have running water due to low water pressure, probably because the gardener is watering the roses all day. So they said that you might have to let someone else come into your room. And to be honest, I think my room I could just about fill a bowl of water to actually just have a wash. It was that the water pressure was so bad, but again, it didn't matter. It was just a bed for the night. But I love the way they sort of repaired things around there, just like a little bit of wire, just where the door handle had snapped off. But at the end of the day, it does the job. But because it was a bit dodgy, they had this lovely soup, even though I think there's bits of cheese floating in it. I wasn't sure exactly what it was, but because there was a massive debate going on, like, should we chance the salad? Because the hotel looked a bit dodgy. And Westerners generally, we tend to sort of be a bit softy when we go abroad, very easily get food poisoning. So I have to be careful what I eat just in case, just from having a few bad experiences in the past. So I thought, no, I won't take the chance. I thought I'm not going to be adventurous with food if there's a good chance of food poisoning, because it might cost me a day's birding, which would just be an absolute nightmare. So nearly, this was the day where we were going for Palaces Sandgrouse. Now, Palaces Sandgrouse, in the late 1800s and the early 1900s, there were several invasions where they just went $1, boom, and there's quite big numbers turned up in the UK, and they actually stopped, and I think that's even a place like Shetland, and stopped and bred, because I think even in the Bramble building, I think they've got some specimens that were taken in the late 1800s, like they got the adult and the chick, so pretty gross that, shooting the adults and then killing the chicks just to have them stuffed. But they were, they would turn up these invasion years. But sadly, what's happened as the habitat has decreased, it's getting rarer and rarer where Palaces Sandgrouse turn up in the UK. So it was a bird that I was really hoping to see. As we went to the area, there's things like demoiselle crane feeding chicks, which was great to see. More familiar birds, little ring plover, hoopoe, nice to see. Newly fledged hoopoe chick, nice and close, and sand martins there just getting around to building their nests. But we were basically waiting at this watering hole, because this was the watering hole where we were hoping to see the Palaces Sandgrouse. The local kids obviously find it quite exciting that these funny looking British people just suddenly turn up and start hanging around the watering hole. So they were coming over for a drink and a nosy, but not ideal. One of our group we were hiding in a bush at this side. The guy at the back obviously didn't realize that probably the sandgrouse wouldn't come in if they saw him standing there. So we kind of got him over as well and waited for the kids to go away naturally. Things were cropping up, baby mass wagtail, black-headed yellow wagtail, sort of, male shuffling himself around, displaying to the female. Eurasian turtle dove, again, nice to see. And then we had some sandgrouse flying in, and it's like, ooh, but, black-bellied sandgrouse, nice to see, but wasn't the Palaces sandgrouse, which is smaller, longer-tailed, with a very white underwing, which is one of the most key features when they fly in. But sadly, we never saw them. And obviously, that's I've probably get over it now from all the therapy, and it didn't really help that Henna's put for the advertisement for this talk actually put up a picture of a Palaces sandgrouse, because when I got home, I spoke to Reg and I described where we'd been for the Palaces sandgrouse. He said, "Oh no, that's the site from last year. This year they're about a mile or two further down the railway." So we were a bit gutted on that one. So we didn't actually get Palaces sandgrouse, which was a major dip, which is probably one of the reasons why I really, really, really want to go to Mongolia someday, because like the birding there sounds amazing. Speaking to James Lidster, who used to work for Sunbird, he said that, you know, pretty much every day you saw Palliser sandgrouse in Mongolia. Someday you might see hundreds, you know, really big numbers. So who knows, maybe one day we could, you know, try it on to go to Mongolia. So dry and arid, we're moving up into the mountains now, up towards the snow line. So we were heading up to stay at an observatory. But before we got there, we visited this lake, which has got the runoff from the snow-capped mountains. We pulled up here, and you can just see at the end of the track where we are, there's a little brown hut. There is a guard to the reservoir here, and they can sometimes cause problems. So the idea of the game is get to the site before the guards have woken up, and then sneak down the path and hope they don't spot you. So, you know, luckily we managed to do that, and we were going about a mile, 2 miles down this track to get to where the water was. So we were heading sort of like to where the river was draining in this sort of like sort of settling bed, and one of the things that we were coming here for that was really special was ibis bill. Really amazing looking wader, and I managed to pick one up, and I was trying to describe where it was, and I said, oh, look at that kink in the river, can you see it? It looks like, you know, the McDonald's sign, it looks like the McDonald's sign on its side. And I was trying to sort of point it out. So in the end, I just realized, I grabbed a pen and I drew like the river, and I put a little cross on it, and like everyone managed to get the scopes on it, and thankfully then there was this ibis bill, quite a bizarre looking wader. It actually got flushed at one point by a hooded crow, and it was like a common sandpiper on steroids, the noise that it was making, but it's just got this ibis bill, hence its name, you know, but it's blood red, black face, white trimmings around the edge, the grey. It's just, what a cool looking bird. It's like, you know, sort of, it's got to be in anyone's, you know, sort of like, you know, top 10 or even top 3 waders in the world. It's just a fabulous looking species, because I had seen one in 98 in Nepal, but it was about a mile away. So like this thing, you know, it was only about sort of 50 to 100 meters top. So, you know, nice views through the scope and okay shots with the camera. So that was great to see. Other bits and bobs behind that I had around there was this was a type of pika. They're a type of rodent, but they look, you know, halfway between a sort of a guinea pig and a rabbit, really. But they're nice to see. And Eversman's red start. Again, I think it's in the birds of, you know, Europe and the Western Palearctic, because I think they winter in Kuwait or just in the edge of the Western Palearctic. So again, one of these birds I'd seen in my bird book since I was a child, so great to see those. The females are much duller, but it's a really nice looking red start. I thought we also had blue cap red start, but I didn't get very good photos of that. Just okay scope views, but didn't get great photos. So we were staying actually on the top of the mountain on an astronomical observatory instead of a bird observatory. And the sky at night was beautiful, obviously, because there was just no light pollution up there. And it did get quite chilly. Not sure exactly what this is. It looks like a Martian death ray to me, but we never really got around to asking what it was and what it did. But that was the view from outside my bedroom window. The habitats that we were birding in was literally just at the back of the complex, you know, where there's like the juniper bushes and things. And the species that we're getting just around here were really good. This is Himalayan ruby throat. I was a bit slow on the camera with this one, because the first one they saw, I think they played the tape to tape lure it, and it looked towards us, looking you straight in the eye, white brow, puffed its red throat out, then it fans its tail, and it's got a tail like a wheat ear. It was like, oh my God, you know, what a great view, but what a shot that would have been. But still, fantastic bird, and great to see it and get some nice shots of it. So this is Himalayan ruby throat, and we had a few here. Again, I think I saw one in Nepal in 1998. So it was good to catch up with this species again and get, you know, better views, to be honest. So that was brilliant. And there's a shot of one next to a red, what's this? Red mantle rosefinch. That's a female. The females are quite dull, and the males, well, I don't know why it's called red mantle rosefinch, because they're pretty pink, like a lot of rosefinches are, really. But again, that's like one of the specialities at this high elevation there. And again, we had a few types of accenta while we were up here. This is a black-throated accenta. Accentas are related to dunnocks, because the proper name for the dunnock really is the hedge accenta. So this is black-throated accentor, and as you see it from front on, it's got the nice black throats. And these are the ones that occasionally turn up in winter in Finland every couple of years, but they're a lot more buffy fringed when they turn up. Sulphur-bellied warbler. Again, this is a bit similar to a rad's warbler, and again, this is where this is a habitat up in the mountains there. And this is I don't think it's Himalayan marmot, but a type of marmot that you get in the Tian Shan Mountains. And we were actually watching this from out of our the window of the coach. But while it was sitting there, it spent the whole time with its head facing away. And we were there for about 5 minutes and nothing happened. And then someone had the great idea. It's like, hold on, it's surely up here, one of its main predators is going to be the golden eagle. So he got his tape and he played the call of the golden eagle out the side, and you should have seen its head move. It's like, oh my God, golden eagle here. So then it was facing towards us, and then we got some nice photographs of it. And thankfully, it didn't scurry off because it realised that there wasn't a golden eagle around. So other birds we had there, great finches. These are big, chunky. This is a white-winged grosbeak. Some of the older members in the audience probably remember the old Punch and Judy shows and that funny noise that Punch made, and they sound just like Punch from the Punch and Judy show, so it's a little bit sort of scary when they start calling. But this is a fine male with a nice sort of dark black hood and back and chest, and the females, a bit more paler and washed out there. So next day we went even higher to sort of right to the the snowy area on the peaks. And I don't know how you pronounce that place name, but as we got to this village that was sort of totally abandoned really now, we're just mooching around the buildings, and it looks like something left over from the old sort of Sputnik missions, a little bit of rocket there left. But we come to see the birds that was perching on it there. This is Gutenstart's red start. We'd seen Everman's red start, and this is Gutenstart's red start, otherwise known as white-winged red start, because like when you see it's got a really big white panel in the wing there. And I have caught up with them again since in Georgia in the Caucasus Mountains, but it was really nice because that was a lifer then. It was really good to see it, sort of nice looking birds there. And you can see the big white panel in the wing as they fly. Okay, just 2 seconds. Sean, can you just keep it down a bit, please? Righty-ho. So here we come on to another accentor. This is brown accentor. Again, a bit like black-throated accentor, but it's got a pale throat. That's a shot of it from underneath. It does look a little bit raised, the throat, but that's just because it was a bit of a windy spot because we were at the top of the mountain there. But this was a far more photogenic accentor. This is the Altai accentor. It looks similar to, this is Alpine accentor. This is a shot I got in Morocco a few years ago. They do, these occasionally turn up in Britain, very rarely. I've not managed to catch up one in Britain, but they're, like a Dunnock on steroids, but they've got nice orangey underwing and the spots on the wing and the yellow base to the mandible. Altai accentor is the same sort of size and structure, a bit orangey, but doesn't have the yellow base to the bill, and the wings aren't as spotty. But again, nice to see, and because they were quite tame and approachable. And then it comes to scanning the peaks for snowcocks, because this is the realm of the Himalayan snowcock. So it was scope's eye and scan the ridges, because snowcocks are generally very slow moving, big fat, like a partridge on steroids, but almost the size of a kappa, but a big fat thing. And so we were kind of looking around that, and then we managed to pick up two, and they just looked like big boulders, and some horrendously cropped sort of digiscopes, but you can kind of see they've got a very black belly, and they've got these like two dark stripes on the neck there. But the flora is amazing. I think Nature Trek do quite a few trips just to see the flora of the Tian Shan Mountains, because you've got like all these wild tulips, these sort of succulent plants. Again, there's the tulip with some form of primula. You know, it's, you know, I'm not a botanist, but I couldn't help but to be impressed by the numbers of flowers that were around there, and some type of pansy or viola. And apparently there's I think there's a type of onion, or related to the onion, and there's quite a lot of species in Kazakhstan. But the alpine meadows there are just absolutely, the flora there is just absolutely amazing. So the next bird that we're going for lives in where you can see the little bits of snow coming down the valley. There's just like a few little scrubby areas, and it's this kind of habitat where you got juniper trees and some bushes there. And we were looking for this little fellow. This is the white-browed tit warbler. You know, beautiful. When I went to Nepal in '98, it was on the front of the book, The Birds of Nepal, but I never managed to sort of to see it then. But you know, finally got to catch up with this bird. It's just an amazing looking bird. You know, it's as I say, it looks like the cross between a tit and a warbler, but it's just got these blues and these purples, and they just fuse into each other. And the bright red eyes, just a stunning looking bird that behaves like a Dartford warbler, the way it just kind of creeps around. And then they were feeding young, so we weren't a million miles away from the nest, so we did get to see it. We didn't see the nest, but it was we got to see them feeding, well, coming to the nest site, and obviously feeding the chicks, which was great. So that's white-brown tit warbler, amazing looking bird. So then we headed off to the north, up towards Astana, just at the top there. And when we arrived there, this is the new capital, so there's all these new buildings, and they've looked at all the art of a lot of the buildings around the world. There's all these amazing looking buildings going up, and this funny tower here, which I don't know if anyone's ever been to Bolton, to like the football ground there. They've got something a bit similar to this on the roundabout just before you go into the stadium, but I don't think they got their inspiration for this from Bolton. One thing that did make me laugh, though, is when we had the internal flight, is the onboard entertainment was Mr. Bean. And when we were at the airport, you know, where they always have the sign that says, like, no knives, no guns, they also had a picture of a mace. And I thought, who the hell would try and take a mace onto, you know, a plane? But then again, thinking about it, you know, Kazakhstan was occupied by Genghis Khan for quite a while. So, you know, the mace was quite a popular weapon during these times. So, funnily enough, after I saw this, and we're in the departure lounge to get on the domestic flight, I went to have a look at souvenirs, and you could buy souvenir maces, the proper job. But obviously that'd be a slight issue, because I don't think you could take that on the into the cabin on your hand luggage. So I gave it a miss on that one. So we arrived, and we were heading out to our accommodation for the night. But as we were doing that, we'd heard news that the main site for sociable plover that breeds in Kazakhstan, one of the previous groups that had been out there had no joy whatsoever. So that was a bit of a worry. But as we were going along, we were heading from Astana in the top right here on that orange road that goes down to this big wetland area on the left. And as we were sort of leaving Astana, there's some wetlands that the motorway went through, and there's like white-winged black terns, and we had a bit of birding just for like 20 minutes, and there's like sort of paddy field warbler and Dalmatian pelican, you know, sort of new birds, and good to see them well. Beamer race of yellow wagtail, booted warbler. As I said, that replaces Sykes warbler when you go further north. Its bill's a little bit shorter and sort of a little bit darker, less sandy coloured. And then there's all these tadpole shrimps in a little wet patch that we found that was nice to see, because I'd never seen those. And as we're going birding along the road, we're going through farmland that gradually becomes plain. So, you know, there's things like short-eared owl flying across the road, and then blacklark, wow, excellent, you know, sort of you know, I'd only seen one before, that was at South Stack. And then what happened is, as we got into the proper plains, you know, it was like constant blacklarks just flying across the road all the time, and they were really common there. So that was great to see. And then I screamed stop, because I'd spotted two sociable plovers just at the side of the road. So we managed to sort of stop, reverse, and I got the shot through the back of the window. Then everyone piled off the bus, and then sort of, you know, just as we got our cameras out, unfortunately the sociable plover flew off. But we carried on, and then other birds flying over, things like pallid harrier, you know, more sociable plover. You know, so for a bird that we were worrying whether we were going to see it, we ended up getting good views of quite a few of them. amazing looking lapwings. And then we even came across a pair that had 1 or 2 chicks. So that was good to see as well. So fabulous looking birds. And there was like small poplars lining this main road. So and in these poplars there was nesting red-footed falcons. That was a male. This is a female. You can see how dark the males are there. And then there's oriental turtle dove. But we were staying at this lady's house, Mrs. Nadija's house in Kogaraldigin. Right, there's no hotels in this area. So what happens is this lady, she puts birders up when they go there, sort of just for a couple of days while they can have a few days birding in the area. So Mrs. Nadija, she was very nice. Actually, I think it was her, not Svetlana, that taught me to say kushet, which means food. So whenever tea was ready, she'd say kushet, and we'd come running. So this was the back of the house. So sort of pretty basic going into the plains there. What happened is when the birders came and stayed at her house, she'd kick her husband out and he'd go and live in the shed for a few days. But it seemed to work well for all people. And, lovely food at the end of the day, sort of like nice soups and bread. And then she put all these little biscuits and sweets. So, it was nice and very, very homely. That was my room there. I'm not sure. I think there's like a little bit of a sewage pipe or something, or a water pipe at the back. But my bed's on the right there. I did find it funny though, for like the electric sockets in the wall, they just plastered up, just sort of wallpapered over the sockets, and then just kind of punched a hole where they could feel where it was. And then anyway, at least it worked, and I could recharge my camera batteries anyway. And thankfully there were no fires or anything like that. These were 2 retired doctors that were on the trip, and I don't know, I think they were repairing their telescope there, tripod, either that or a bit of makeshift brain surgery by the look of it. But it's quite interesting seeing the backyards around there in Kazakhstan. Sort of, they've got the larder in the back garden and the prized possessions, and they've got like a few cows and like some old Soviet vehicle that's just been dumped at the side. You can sort of see there's no way you can get that larder out because the wheels are totally immersed in cow feces. And then you go for a drive, and then you get stuck behind a big herd of goats and sheep. It's just like driving through Llandudno at the moment. It's you see all these pictures of all the goats, sort of that have come off the Orme, and they're just going around the streets of Llandudno because it's so quiet at the moment. But one of the things that was a bit weird here was there was a massive infestation of flies. They weren't biting, but they were just a plain nuisance there. As you can see, one of the guys, Craig, getting a little bit upset by it all. I had to make shift by doing this to try and keep the flies off my face. And, it was a little bit of a problem. Svetlana obviously came prepared. I don't know whether we just missed that on the list of useful things for the trip, but none of us brought one, unfortunately. And even watching this hooded crow, it was getting annoyed by the flies. The reason it's flitting around here was because there was so many flies landing on it. It was just sort of getting a bit annoyed by it, like we were. But there's great wetlands around there. Things like, lots of white-winged black terns, sort of, species that we don't see very often over here. And it seemed nice seeing them nesting next to hooper swan with chicks there. It just seemed a bit weird, because I always kind of thought white-winged black terns were more of a southern species, and obviously hooper swans you always associate with things like Iceland and that. And then black-winged pratincoal flies over with an eastern jackdaw. It's got a nice white neck collar there. And the reed beds were full of interesting species like red-spotted blue throat and bearded tit. But if you look at the bearded tits, it's a lot paler than the ones we get here in the UK. It's very sort of sandy pale subspecies, especially when looking at the female. It's a lot paler than the bearded tits that we get here in the UK. And again, instead of reed warblers over there, it was paddyfield warbler. It was the common reed warbler. And the reed buntings are of the eastern race, so they've got a more chunky bill like a bullfinch. And when they fly off, they've got quite a white rump as well. Wild red-crested pochard did a bit of a flyby. But the birding on these wet areas was fantastic. There's us looking at a flock of redneck phalaropes, and there's a marsh sandpiper with them as well. And the phalaropes is feeding on the little insects that sort of come and land on the water, so there's plenty of food for them there. You can see that one cat trying to catch a little fly there. But I mean, look at all the flies that are emerging there. It was great food for the birds, but a bit irritating for us. And then you get these big flocks of waders coming across, on closer inspection. They were all little stints and redneck phalaropes, so amazing seeing them in such big numbers. But The reason we've gone to this spot, that was great to see, was the nested great black-headed gulls, as they used to be known. They're now called Pallas's gulls, but what a fabulous looking gull. It's again like a Mediterranean gull on steroids, but with a lovely yellow and red bill and great wing pattern, and got this nice shot of it with the moon in the background. But absolutely fantastic, you know, one of definitely in the top 10 gulls in the world. It's a really nice looking gull, and can you imagine the twitch if one of those turned up in Britain? It'd be amazing. So we headed out then to a much bigger wetland area, and I think it's one of the few spots there. There's a few spots where white-headed duck still breeds over there. The flies were replaced by mosquitoes here, so but at least thankfully mosquito repellent did work with them if you put plenty jungle formula on, and that's some form of Asian ground squirrel by the looks of it. Birds that were nesting around here, things like citrine wagtail on the nesting ground, and oriental turtle dove. Now, this is of the, it's not the orientalis race. I think it's the meaner race because it's got the white in the tip to the tail. As you go further east, the orientalis has got more of a grayer tinge. I think there's just one common crane there, and we'd already seen demoiselle crane. So there's some, you know, more black larks here, and there's one that's got the nice sort of white patch on the back. There's a Central Asian race of twite. It's got a very long tail. We caught up with some of those while we were there as well, and we had a nesting pair of the, I think it's the Pallidostris race of Merlin. In flight, you can see it's much paler than the ones that we get here in the UK, and also the females, which are quite dark brown in the UK. There's a very pale, washed out light brown colour. It was quite funny here. So the shops seem to be working a different way. They just went up to this door and sort of knocked on it, and then all of a sudden this hand would come out with some water, and then you'd exchange money. So it's quite funny seeing how they did things over there. And then some of the local kids went past, three kids on this little quad bike, and then you realise that the 2-year-old is actually sort of driving the quad bike, which I just love that picture. I just think it's fantastic. Yeah, because you definitely wouldn't see that over here. 3 kids on a quad bike. This day we needed to sort of get to the other side of the river, but the driver had to sort of wait till sort of someone else had been through to show him the way, so we didn't get swept away. Because on the other side of the river, on the edge of the riverbank, there was these things were breeding barred warbler. We normally see them this is like how we see them in the UK, usually first winter, quite dull, but over there, great to see sort of singing male barred warblers in full stonking breeding plumage, you know, lovely sort of barring on them and bright yellow eyes. So that was fabulous to see, because that was the first time I'd ever seen them in such fine plumage. Other birds that were around there, things like Caspian tern, and there's also nesting black-winged pratincoles, again, something we very rarely see here in the UK. Great to see over there, and get a nice shot of the underwing there, like proper black, not orange like in collar pratincole, no pale trailing edge to the wing. So other birds, things like gull-billed tern, slender-billed gull, these were sort of breeding around these large lakes in the open plain. And more familiar ones, things like avocet. We must have been close to the nest because I'd never seen an avocet doing this before, where they pretend to have a broken wing to lure you away from the nest. So hopefully you don't predate them. But one of the final birds that we finished off on was white-winged lark. When you see them scurrying around, the thing that gives them away is this lovely chestnut cap on the male, and sort of quite a white patch around the eye. You can see the female at the back. She's actually quite dull, just looks a bit like a dull skylark, to be honest, especially, when you see them like that. But then when they fly, it's like it turns into a redshank. It's just got this massive wedge of white in the wings. So again, another mega rare bird for reaching the Western Palearctic. So, I'd never seen it before. So that was great to see. So that was brilliant there. So we said goodbye to Mrs. Najija, and we headed back to the capital because we had a flight to take later in the day. They were trying to recruit us into the Kazakh army. At least you get a massive hat if you do join them. So we were saying goodbye to the steppes, and we were saying goodbye to the black larks because we were leaving their habitat. And we actually managed to sort of see a female as well. So that was nice to see because I'd not seen one of those. So passing the red-footed falcons, there was a police check, and they were stopping us just to check our papers were in order. But unfortunately, one of the guys on our trip had lost his migrational card. This guy, I think his name was Richard, I'm not sure, but really nice bloke, one of the retired doctors. And unfortunately, we were there for about an hour and they were debating what to do. And it turned out that all you had to do was bung the guy 20 quid and then he'd let you be on your way. So we headed off towards the airport. We had one last little, one or two birding spots to do. We had nesting field fairs there, more second helpings of azure tit. But the driver got the willies a bit. He was a bit worried that if we got stopped again, because one of his clients didn't have the right papers, he was worried that he would get in trouble. So unfortunately, this chap who was absolutely lovely, so I think his name was Richard, he basically he went back to the airport and he waited because we had one final bird to go for. So to be fair, the guy took a bullet for the team because we had one last sight, and this was for pine bunting. And I think pine bunting, I always presumed it would nest in sort of like, sort of piney areas, but it doesn't. It just replaces yellowhammer when you go further east. The place we went to was just arable farmland, like you'd see yellowhammer over here. So we got to see male pine bunting, and the song is quite similar to yellowhammer as well. So great to get that. As a final cherry on the cake. So when Borat said that Kazakhstan was the greatest country in the world, I don't know, maybe he was right, but it's certainly a fantastic place to go birding. It was there for 12 days, 250 species, 34 lifers. So it's quality, not quantity, but we have breeding plumage, Caspian plover, sociable plover, Pallas's gull, barred warbler, ibisbill, Himalayan snowcock and ruby throat, McQueen's bustard, 3 new red starts, 3 new accenters, black lark, white-winged lark, just to name a few. So generally, it was just great birding. So I'll finish off with a lovely sunset over the yurts where we were staying out in the desert towards the start of the trip. So thank you very much for listening to me waffle on. I hope you've enjoyed Bird Group this season, and hopefully we can see as many of you as possible next season. Because even if we go back to lectures in the theatres, hopefully we'll definitely do a few on Zoom so we can catch up to people further afield around the UK. Okay, so thank you very much.